Let me see if I can catch this. All right, I'm going to start I'm going to do video right now. And you know how I get when I do my videos. And I'm going to start prophesying. And this is going to, the other night, I take these little vitamin things at night. And I chew them. You're not supposed to chew them because they're like chewing aspirins, but I'll take 3 of them and I'll chew them. They're like natural things to help you sleep. But when I chewed them, what they say goes down the wrong pipe, I started coughing. And it was just time for me to read at night for the hour. And then I also, in the middle of my reading, I'll do my worship scripture. I'll pray, I'll walk in the yard, I'll pray in the tree area. Everything is ordered. But I was coughing and coughing and coughing like I was going to figure it. And I drank a little of my tea, but for a good hour and a half, to the point where I started losing my voice. Because in the morning when I'm praying, I worship. And I quote and I worship loud. So if some of my kids will stay here and then they'll stay somewhere else, but then they come back but if no one is in that back bedroom when I'm worshiping over there, so I had a hard time. I said, oh, I can't lose my voice, not just because I speak, but I like to worship. And I thought, man, maybe I'll do a quick update video, though I did not check the news. But it's interesting because this could have value to teach, but I want to deal with some issues. I was writing last night. I did somebody mentioned sometimes some of my friends, I'm quite patient with some of my friends. But sometimes, of course, I retired from the fire department. And the ministry stuff, there's people that get paid to do the things that I do. But I choose not to get money from the things I do. Because it's the benefit that I can do these things without charging. But sometimes, and one of my friends, if people have but he's okay when I speak to him one-on-one and I help him. But if he's around other people, I realize he's got that social problem. But then he'll say to me, like, trying to have like a fellowship, and then he'll say, so why don't you work, John? And I said, well, I retired so I can do the ministry. And I had to explain. I said, a lot of people actually, I do work. Today, for instance, I got up at 5. It's 8:30 now. But I'm preparing, I'm teaching, and I try to explain sometimes. I said, it's a lot of work to do the ministry, besides the free help that I give you on a weekly basis, which you have told me you appreciate. Counseling and visiting. And sometimes when I used to visit Pops, it was just part of the ministry. And I remember he told me, he said, John, there's a couple of people that get paid to come help Pops because he was a veteran and they were supposed to come by. And I remember Pops told me one day, and they come by, they rush, they don't show up. These are people that are getting paid either out of Corpus Christi as, care workers or whatever. And he said, I should just tell him Preacher John does it all for free. Now, so I don't want to, I had to go through that yesterday. I said, well, my friend, I said, I do a lot of work. And when I retired, I wanted to dedicate my time to do the ministry. And people get paid to do these things, but all right, but as I was reviewing for our Sunday post that comes up Sunday, the video I already uploaded the other day, the Sunday sermon for the date for this past Sunday, and of course I add footnotes or bullet points. One of the themes on that video happened to be when the angel Gabriel finally came to answer the prayer of Zacharias, the father of John the Baptist, that he really didn't have the faith. For instance, the answer came, God revealed himself, the angel comes to Zacharias and said, your prayers are heard. Your wife Elizabeth's going to have a son. And he simply doubts. He does not believe. And then last night when I was reading, that's why I said this could have been a teaching video. And I'm not scatterbrained, but when you have a lot of projects, you're doing a lot of things. So last night I read in whatever gospel. It's in order, but I'll forget stuff. But I know which one I read last night because I marked them. So I'm reading in the gospel the parable most are familiar with, the Bible students, of the unjust judge. Sometimes we refer to it. And so there's one part out of the verses that I'll write down, eventually paint them or post them or hang them up. Here's a whole bunch that I've just been writing over months. Men ought always to pray and not to faint. Now I had to condense it. And shall not God avenge his own elect which cry unto him night and day? Though he bear long with him, I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Okay, that's the parable of Jesus. It's going to be teaching I won't do. Jesus said, in a certain city, there was this unjust judge. Notice how many times Jesus speaks about judges. And in this case, he's wicked. There's this wicked judge. Herod, go tell that fox. Wait a minute, he's the authority figure. There are times where prophetic voices speak about unjust judges. And he says, and he did not regard God or man. He really didn't care about doing justice. He didn't really care about people. He was an unjust judge. Sat around, maybe, I'm going to do meth deal today and this or this. Unjust judge. But then it says there was a widow in the city. And she came to that judge thinking, well, of course I pay taxes and, maybe these judges will do their job. And she said, avenge me of mine adversary. And the judge didn't care, like I got my own corruption going on. And Jesus is telling this story. But then finally she kept coming to the judge. And he said, though I do not care about God, I don't care about people, but she's wearing me out by her continual coming. Like Samson's girl, Delilah. Tell me the secret of your strength, Samson. Tell me the secret of your strength. It's kind of a funny verse in the Old Testament. And it says she was basically nagging him so much. He said, oh, it's in my hair. Cut my hair. I'll lose my strength. So here this lady comes to the judge. And he says, okay, I'm going to just avenge her. And then Jesus uses this. He said, now listen what the unjust judge did. Because she just kept coming with the request, that's the only he said, but what about God, who is a just judge? And when his children listen, Jesus said, crying night and day. Sometimes you think, oh, am I praying too much all the time? Or even at night quoting scriptures or this, maybe maybe they diagnose those things. Jesus says they cry night and day. God will avenge his elect and he will avenge them speedily. But then right at the end, that's why I said, I could maybe the teaching. At the end of that parable, he says, but when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? And that's a good example of Zechariah, the father of John. Praying. Okay, God's coming. He spoke through the angel Gabriel, appeared, but will he find faith? At that moment of the fulfillment, when it was all there, the angels come to reveal that your prayer is heard, Zechariah. But remember, will he find faith? Because at that moment, he didn't find faith in Zechariah because he doubted that promise. Now, that's how I decided to talk a little. I have friends. Yesterday when I was just seeing some of my friends, and I was on my motorcycle. I use it a lot because my daughter's car had broken down, and I'd gotten a wreck. So I let her use my car, kind of just as her car now. And so I was riding the bike, and I saw some friends. I saw Claire and Crow. Now I almost did a video, and if they get to watch this, and I like to joke around sometimes. And I have not seen Crow in a while, and we were up at the little shopping center here where Rock City Church is and Wells Fargo, and it's kind of like a little shopping center in Florida Bluff. It was interesting because the cops, of course, they will go through and if people are panhandling. Now Crow does not do that, okay? But if people are like, as some of my friends do that, if they're asking for money, And the cops rightfully will just tell them, you know, we got a complaint from Dollar Tree or whatever, and people are outside. And I understand they get tired. And so I was sitting with Crow. I was going to go into the dollar store, which I did. And I was glad to see Crow because I haven't seen him in a while. He was with Paisley. Paisley is the beautiful dog you see on some of my videos. And Jammer, or Caveman, he's back in jail again. So Paisley's kind of with Crow and Claire. And I said, oh, good, I get to see you, brother. And then Claire, I passed her up as I was riding a motorcycle. And I said, Claire, okay. So then, you know, it's funny on the street, and sometimes I think of jokes ahead of time before I'm going to make the video, so I went in the Dollar Tree. And then I came out, and Claire was there with Crow. And I said, I was thinking of making the video and saying, like, I'll kid them sometime. And some of my friends, you know, look, they've had kind of violent history. So I said I was going to make the video and say, you know, sometimes it's violent on the street. And look, actually, I said, and I'm not afraid. I said, but, and I told Claire I was going to joke, but if Claire is kind of rude to me, I'm not coming out anymore. And now Crow looks funny at me, like he knows, like, Claire, she sticks up for herself. So when he sees like a kid like that, he thinks I'm surprised. You know, Claire might say, but as me and Crow were sitting there, just by the Wells Fargo, my bank, some man drove up 2 bags of dog food, and it had a $10 bill. Crow was not panhandling. I obviously don't panhandle. Just came up. But there were officers in the parking lot, and we thought maybe they would drive by us and say, you guys can't sit here. They did not. It was a female officer because there's an RV that was parked in that parking lot here in Flower Bluff. It's been there for a while, like a new one, expensive one. And these are people that just like park in the Walmart parking lots or things like that over time. And we noticed the cops went up to that RV. And me and Crow were wondering, I wonder what they're doing. And I guess they were giving people notice, you know, you just can't, these are private parking lots, and, you know, you can't park in them, like, for long periods of time. And then a tow truck pulled up close to where me and Crow were sitting. There's like a little ice cream stand there that sometimes it's open, sometimes it's closed. But then the tow truck pulled up to like a very expensive BMW, maybe, Datsun or whatever, like a new vehicle. And I thought, oh, I wonder what's going on. And then the female officer, I don't know who she was, she went into T-Mobile. She had some papers, because Crow said, oh, it looks like they're serving papers. What was happening was this, and if I were to guess, it might be like a Navy officer. Maybe one of the pilots. We have a Navy base. It's a very expensive car. And he just parked it there off of Waldron with a for sale sign. Maybe he was parking it there for a couple of days. I don't do that, you know, but people do those things to try to sell their vehicle. Maybe he got stationed somewhere else or whatever. Sure enough, the tow truck, that's what the officers were doing. They were enforcing people that are trying to sell their vehicles, like on private property. And they just towed that away. And I just sat there, and we realized, oh, that's what they're doing. That's why they spoke to the man in the RV. And I thought, man, that guy's going to be so mad. And I understand it because it's going to be a big tow, expensive. It was a very expensive new car. He had a for sale sign. And of course, when he shows up later that day, he's going to think somebody might have stole it. And he'll have to call the police or whatever. I think it probably would have been better. I'm assuming that people have complained about those types of things, and now the PD's going to have to enforce those things. And it's not their fault that they have to enforce them. I just think those, the city leadership, if you're going to start like, oh, we got something, we're going to change something, maybe we've let people park their vehicles, but now it would be much better to give them a notice first. Because it's very possible you caused maybe a Navy pilot that's getting stationed somewhere else. That's kind of what I thought, and he's selling a vehicle. And I just thought that was unnecessary to maybe just notify the community first and put it out there. I didn't read anything like that recently. And so I'm sure he would show up later in the evening. Man, somebody stole my brand new vehicle. An expensive brand new vehicle is what he was trying to sell. And the other thing I said to Crow, I said, oh, maybe he's behind on payments. But then we realized, because the PD spoke to some other people that were parked there, more than likely he was just enforcing that rule. When I talked to one of my friends the other day, I have friends, and I won't give the names, though you've not seen a lot of these friends before. And it was interesting because though he was talking about the Lord and we were speaking about Scripture, but after I shut the video off, he also, and some of my friends are prophetic in the sense that they'll be talking about issues that, and what he was saying was, in our government, John, in our government, you know, the Bible says that we people even treat their animals well. There's scriptures that talk about that. He said, but look what our government does. And my friend, by the way, the one I'm speaking about, a few years ago when he turned 62, I started telling some of my homeless friends, these last 10 years or so, some are not aware. I said, when you turn 62, I said, you can apply for Social Security. Many of them either don't do it or are not aware of it. And I said, no, I'm telling you. Well, John, and some of them worked for many years, and I worked off the books. I said, just go when you're 62. Now, I know he didn't believe me, and I helped him at that time do that. A couple of rides down to the office. And he didn't get a lot. He got about $500 or $600 a month. But that was for the records of the years that he did work that were on the books. And I remember him saying, he started saying after he got that, he would tell people, look, I'm retired. I'm enjoying my life now. Now, though some of my friends will use some of that money, whether it's for alcohol or whatever, but what that did for him was it made him feel like he did accomplish something. It wasn't the disability thing. It wasn't some of the people that have gotten the disability checks wrongfully, wasted them. It was something he felt like, and I achieved something. And finally, you know, even the government recognized, yes, this man deserves, he worked for so many years that were on the books and he gets this. But then he was going off on the government. And you know, a lot of people, John, they self-medicate with heroin and this and that because the government is not even, I thought, well, I said, brother, I actually talk about a lot of that. I said, because he don't see all my videos. Then I realized we had a mutual friend. And I remember the mutual friend was in addiction for many years. And finally, when he got clean, through AA and NA, he was just like an experience with God. And I remember over time, the mutual friend would tell me, because the mutual friend has a lot of physical conditions, very bad, a lot of pain. Now, I had a lot of that. Bad back problems, my leg goes out every so often from back injury that I had. But I kept getting up, I got to do my prayer time during those years. I got to walk, and sometimes my leg would go out, and I would fall. Even if I was doing my walk. And it's whatever nerve damage you get to your leg because you have back disc problems. And every so often that happens. Very painful. It's not like a cramp. It's much worse. And you can tell when it's going to happen. So if I was doing my walk and that happened, it happened a few times when I was with Pops. Like if you just get out of the car and you bend your leg, and I'm in pain, and Pops saw me that way once. I was taking him to the store. I said, oh, Pops. But if it happens and I'm walking, I just pretend like, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to lay down here for a little while. But this mutual friend would tell me over time, I can't get the pain medication, John, for he has a lot of physical problems. And some of his other friends would say to him, if you can't get the pain meds, just do the heroin or do the other thing. And he was adamant for a long time. I'm not going to do it. What's the difference, they would tell him, wrongfully. If you can't get it and you're fighting with the government to get the pain pills, that type of thing. And I knew that this other friend had went back. And that's what I knew. Some of my other friends told me, like recently, like they might surprise me. I said, no, I understand. I get it. I know what happened. But that's why this other friend was going off on the government. I realized he was. So I wanted to share that. This is just a little update. There's somewhat, the news thing, I listen to the Christian radio in the morning, doing worship and praise. They also fall for the breaking news. They called it breaking news. Overnight, a judge in California had made a ruling. The whole immigration thing, they said the government, the president, the whole country, you have 30 days, because I'm a judge, to return every one of those immigrant children to their parents. Now, Mr. Trump already made the executive order, and we have what's called bureaucracy in this country, which has to do with something I just spoke about. And I thought, and that's breaking news, one judge, I've seen rulings, the Supreme Court, just in the legal, judicial aspect, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4, basically, and the country and the media are referring to it as the Muslim ban. And all I could say to you, I'm not a conservative, I'm not a liberal, just as somebody that tries to analyze news. When Mr. Trump did that particular ban, and even though it was the same countries that Mr. Obama also, if you will, enforced somewhat of a ban, and then when Trump said, look, these are the same countries that Mr. Obama, because he had changed it, the media said it's a Muslim ban, though it was not a Muslim ban, but countries that you have difficulty that you know who people are when they're applying to come into this country, all of the immigration debate. And finally, and people were challenging it, and the courts just ruled that said the law itself, the thing that Mr. Trump put down on paper, is perfectly legal. And but then the argument that the other side was making was, but he made statements during the campaign and this and that. I'll just tell you from a legal analysis, me as a reader, of course he was allowed to do what he did, whether you agreed with it or not. But then what we're having in the country is a real question about our three branches of government: executive, legislation, judicial. So when you have one judge, whether it's California or anywhere else, say, I now make a ruling. Of course, Mr. Trump already did an executive order, and somehow that ruling, we had judges in the biker case here out of Texas. There was bikers that got in a shootout in a particular thing, and then there was questions whether the officers at that shootout possibly shot some people themselves, like just shooting into a crowd or whatever. All right, and then eventually, as that case was proceeding, the defense for the bikers wanted discovery. Look, we want any information about some officers that shot people there. Not only were they not going to give it in the judicial system here in our state, but then they had to go to the Attorney General of Texas, who is certainly not a liberal. And he gave an order to the judges out of Texas in that Waco case. Said, look, basically you're doing some stuff that's illegal there, boys. And their response, the judges and that system out of the Waco district for that case, they said, we ain't going to do it. Whether you, Attorney General, whether Trump, we ain't going to do it. Now that was, and it's sort of like, what are you going to do? You're going to come in and arrest us? Meaning those judges were acting unjustly. And so if some judge in California says, some of the rulings that have been made this last year, regardless of political view, they're ruling on things like, what you're trying to do, whoever you are, it's legal, but we don't like you because you made statements. I remember when Mr. Obama passed Obamacare. And in order for the insurance thing known as Obamacare to really have worked, you had to kind of have what was called like that penalty, which is now done away with. And it went all the way to the courts because they felt like it was an overreach to have done some of the things. But when the courts ruled, and Justice Roberts, who upset a lot of conservatives because it was a majority ruling, and the Obamacare thing, they actually said publicly multiple times, it's not a tax, it's not a tax, it's not a tax, it's not a fine, but it was a tax, that penalty, in order to fund the Obamacare. Though Mr. Obama said it so many times in his campaign to get that passed, when the courts ruled, they actually ruled and said, well, even though they're stating it's not a tax, and they're even putting it in writing that it's not a tax, in the actual law itself, we think it's sort of that way. So we're not going to go on what he said on the campaign, what he told the public. You understand? But then that same group switched it around and said, even though Trump, and some legal people actually said, what Trump is trying to do on the Muslim ban, though it's not a Muslim ban, is perfectly legal. Some who are against it said, we know it's legal, we just think because he is doing it, it should not pass. Some said that in this argument, which is amazing. So some said, if it was Hillary or Obama trying to do this particular thing on the travel ban, legally, it's perfectly legal. Some legal people said that. But because it's him, we believe we can stop it. So now the whole question is getting into what we just said. We've got to question this country over these three branches of what we know as government: executive, Congress, legislation, and judicial. And are we empowering, or judges going way over their empowerment? Whether it's judges like Sessions said in Hawaii or whatever. And we've got a lot of that going on. So I'm going to end that. There is some teaching value. I saw one of my friends the other day, Furman. And I have another friend, Mike, who's got a nice little apartment or house that he rents. And it's a good deal. And some of my friends, when they saw the house, it's a good deal for the rent. Mike does a lot of work on that house, my artist friend. Investing a lot of money in, it's a project for him, though it's just a rent place. But when some of my friends have seen it, I brought a few friends over there, during my visits with friends. And some said, man, I'd like to maybe rent it. If it comes up, let me know. John, if Mike moves out, gets another place, I said, I'll let you know, brother. And then I saw Furman like a couple weeks ago or 10 days ago. And he asked me, he said, does your friend John, is he still renting that house? I brought Furman over there once to meet Mike. I said, who are you talking about? He said, your friend. He didn't remember the name. He said, your friend that has that house. And in my mind, I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, I don't know who you're talking about. I don't have any friends that are renting a house from him that I took you. And I think he looked at me like, either John is not, he's really can't remember things. And people, because I quote a lot of verses, are like, is he kidding? I'm not kidding. There's times I don't remember. And I had just saw Mike the day before Furman asked me. And I think recently also somebody brought up the name. Do you know a so-and-so, or I forgot who it was, another friend. Like, do you know who Mike is, or do you know who, and I said, who? It was another name of somebody, one of our friends. And I was thinking like of names of people I knew 20 years ago with whatever name that was. I said, I don't know any. And they looked at me like, what do you mean you don't know, And then I said, oh, I just, so sometimes you function as you function. And if you have, that's why discipline's important. I told someone the other day, I said, I don't lose my keys. Because I learned a habit when I was at the firehouse. Everything went in. Oh, I don't have my bag here, but I had a little bag. I still have one for the Bible and stuff at night. I said, when I get home or when I'm going to work, my keys, my glasses, everything goes in at one spot. So I know through discipline, I know where my glasses are. I know where my keys are. So I don't have to if I forget stuff. Okay, so we'll end this. I want to bless you guys. It's a little update. And I didn't even check the news. I'm not sure if we'll do any more today. Tomorrow I should be posting the next Ephesians chapter 5. And so God bless everybody.